Hi everyone, it's Miss Miller, and today what I'd like to do is talk to you about Julius Caesar, more specifically the character of Mark Antony, and his response to the people of Rome after Julius Caesar died. Now he made several speeches, but one I want to pay particular attention to, and help give us some insight. So the question I want to pose to you is, and before we start, you might want to take out your reading of Julius Caesar. I'm in Act 3, Scene 2, and it's where Antony starts with, if you have tears. If you have tears. So if you could take a pause and take a minute to get that, so you have access to it, maybe you can write on it if you have your own copy, or you can just follow along here. And you'll want to really listen carefully because we want to answer the question, what? We know that Caesar died, and some of us think we know how he died. But what I'm going to do is pose another question after reading this passage by Mark Antony. It brings up the question, how did Caesar actually die? We initially think that he dies of stab wounds. Is that right? He dies of stab wounds from all of the traitors, Casca, Cassius, all of the Gaecina, Brutus stabs him. But is that actually how he dies? So let's take a close look to see what Antony sees, or what his observations. So he says, first of all, there's a few things you should know when you read Shakespeare, or even in this particular passage. There's a few things. One is there is no line that is wasted. So if there's a line that you think, oh, that's not needed, I don't know what that is, I don't get it, I don't need to know. You need to know. And you also need to know that it's cyclical. So if he's starting with, if you have tears, prepare to shed them now, know that towards the end, he's going to talk about the crying again. Oh, now you weep, those gracious drops, weep. You can see it again. Another pattern that I noticed when reading Shakespeare, and what makes it confusing, is he uses several different words to kind of communicate the same thing, but he wants to make distinctions. So for example, initially we see tears, but later on he uses gracious drops and weep, because he doesn't want to keep saying tears and shedding tears, so he says it differently. And then we have vestron, cloak, and mantle. And even the knife, first it's a dagger, then it's a cursed steel, then it's a sword. It depends on who he associates with all of this. So let's take these lines step by step, and we're going to see exactly what's happening in this passage. So the first thing he does, Mark Antony, is he sort of makes a disclosure. Like, if you have tears, prepare to shed them now. He's wanting to appeal to our sense of pathos, and we're gonna feel something. He's telling us this is gonna get rough, right? It's like a rating of a movie, rated R. You know that you can't bring a certain group. Rated PG, like this. He's saying this is rated cry. You're gonna rated pathos. This is gonna be rough. So he's telling the people of Rome, if you have tears, prepare to shed them now. And then he starts with a story, an anecdote, right? And he says, you all know this mantle. I remember the first time ever Caesar put it on. 'Twas on a summer's evening in his tent. That day he overcame the Nervi, this tribal, hostile tribe. So first thing he does is he tells us a story, right? We all have first of everything. First love, first job, first car, first day of school. So this has some sort of sentimental value. And he says this to us. You all know this mantle. In this case, the mantle is clothing that they wear. And he refers to the mantle several times throughout the reading. So he starts with preparing us with a disclosure to let us know we're all going to be worked up about this. And then he actually he takes us back and helps us to remember Caesar and the first time he wore this mantle, the same piece of mantle that he was wearing when they stabbed him, right? And then he goes straight into, the other thing you should know is the work is usually divided into sections. So even though it's not divided here, we have to kind of divide it for ourselves. So I underlined these 4 lines to communicate one idea, and then the next few lines communicates a different set of ideas. So here it says, look, in this place ran the Cassius's dagger through. So he's holding up this mantle, this piece of clothes, and he's showing you specifically where Cassius has stabbed Caesar. Right? Look, in this place, Cassius's dagger. So when it's Cassius, it's a dagger. And if you remember when Antony was talking about the noble blood and the purple, the noble blood and the purple on the hands to reflect the blood, the royalty, then that knife was a sword and it had value. But when when he's describing Cassius stabbing, it's just a dagger. And see what a rent the envious Casca made. So you can see again, we learned something because we know Cassius was jealous and envious. We as the audience and the readers did not necessarily know that Casca was too. And a rent isn't something significant. So here's what Casca did. And then we see the contrast, the irony in all of this. Through this, so he's showing you again. So he said, here's where Cassius did it. This is where Casca. And now he's making this contrast. And he's saying, through this, the well-beloved Brutus stabbed. Okay, one, he made dagger through, rent through, but Brutus stabbed, right? And let's take a look how Antony describes Brutus. He's well-beloved. Then we go down to further and he said he's Caesar's angel. And then we see further that Caesar loved him. All right. And then we see through this, the well-beloved Brutus stabbed. He didn't just say Brutus. He wanted to make a point. He's the well-beloved Brutus. And as he plucked his cursed steel, so now this dagger, this sword, when it's Brutus stabbing him, it's a cursed steel. Look at the descriptions, the imagery. And it says pluck. The diction here is beautiful, right? The only time I pluck something is when I'm plucking my eyebrows, and I'm very deliberate about taking the little hairs out. So in this case, I'm thinking Brutus is really deliberate and, to get that. He plucked it out of Caesar. So he put it in and then he took it out, right? And then Antony says, mark how the blood of Caesar followed it. So he's showing the trail of blood, the stain of the blood on Caesar's mantle. As rushing, he uses a simile, as rushing out of the door to be resolved. If Brutus so unkindly knocked or no. Whoa, you might think, oh, that's not important, but it is, because it lets us know that that blood that's rushing from the mantle in the spot where Caesar stabbed, Brutus stabbed him and then plucked it out, that cursed steel. Well, the blood followed. It followed in a way as if Caesar were rushing to the door. Even if Brutus was knocking unkindly, Caesar is going to come to that door, and he's coming fast. And it shows here that Caesar would have done anything for Brutus. He would have done absolutely anything for Brutus, which makes it worse, right? For Brutus, and then it goes on, if you're not sure, the next line kind of reinforces it, and it says, for Brutus, as you know, was Caesar's angel. Judge, oh gods, how dearly Caesar loved him. Wow. That just makes, so remember, he said, be prepared to cry. If you have tears, prepare to shed them now. Right? And then he goes to clarify, this was the most unkindest cut of all. For when the noble Caesar saw him stabbed, not Cassius, not Casca, not anyone else, but when the noble Caesar saw Brutus stab him, listen to what it says. The ingratitude, more strong than the traitor's arms. So the fact that it was Brutus who stabbed Caesar, remember, this is the guy who would have, the blooded trail, he would have ran to the door to get it. If it doesn't matter whether or not Brutus was knocking unkindly, he's going to run to that door, right? This is a long bell. He's running to that door. So ingratitude, more strong than traitor's arms. Quite vanquished him, then burst his mighty heart. These two lines are so powerful in the play, in Mark Antony's speech here. So he's saying that it's Brutus, the ingratitude of what Brutus did, more so than the stabbing of the other guys. That is what killed him. That's what destroyed him. Quite vanquished him. So here you can interpret quite vanquished him as that's where he was like, that's it, I'm done, right? For Caesar. Or quite vanquished as in he's destroyed emotionally, or he physically just, that's when he gives himself permission to die, right? And then it says here, then burst his mighty heart. This is where I think, does Caesar die of a broken heart, or does he die from the stabbings? Which one happens first? Quite vanquished him. This is what destroyed him, knowing that it was Brutus. Maybe he could have survived if it were someone else, but when he saw that it was Brutus, it was just too much. So does he die? We know he dies from the stabbing, right? But does he die from a broken heart first? And in his mantle muffling up his face, so he's making up his face like, oh my God, so he's still alive, right? And his mantle muffling up his face. I love the alliteration of mantle and muffling up his face. Even at the base of Pompey's statue, which all the while ran blood, great Caesar fell. First he's noble, but now he's great. And when he says great Caesar, it makes me think of how Cassius was describing him when he was the colossal, right? But this time it's the great Caesar fell. Oh, what a fall was there, my countrymen. And then I and you and all of us fell down, whilst blood treason flourished over us. Oh, now you weep. So remember, it's cyclical, because at the beginning it talked about him being weep, and now at the end, and I perceive you feel the dint of pity. You just feel a little bit of what I feel. These are gracious drops, kind souls. So he's really kind to the people of Rome. Remember when Brutus gave his speech, Brutus wasn't so kind. He referred to them as you vile individuals. But he says here, kind souls, what weep you when you but behold our Caesar's vesture? Again, the mantle, the vesture, the cloak, different references to the same thing. Wounded, look you here, and then he lifts it up. Here is himself marred, as you see with traitors. And marred and mantle and muffling, the alliteration there brings it all home. So does he die of a broken heart first, or does he die from the stabbing? That's for you to decide.